أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الرحمن الرحيم. مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
آمين. ربنا علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. وصل اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ونبينا محمد. So now we are at the sixth component of the Iqra principle. We did the first five and now we are at the sixth. And this series was prepared for friends who wanted to know what the Iqra principle was. And it also happens to be a sneak peek into our upcoming book in English, which is the revival of the Iqra principle, which is with an American publisher right now. So here goes, ala barakatillah. So first, a brief recap. In the past 5 sessions, what did we do? We continued according to the Iqra principle methodology, which is about what? Quranic context, Quranic language, and how we retrieve it through the oldest Arabic lexicons, and we gain insight from authenticated tradition and scholarly works. And we always reflect upon, you should know by now, the importance of what? Names. Using the right names for everything, which is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first imprinted upon Adam. Allama Adam al-asma'a kullaha. And we reflected and we continue to reflect upon the importance of tadabbur, which is what? It is following a concept, a word, a verse to its dubur. To its dubur means to its end result, to the gist that lies behind it. And we spoke about the divine command, Iqra, and we listed the 6 components of the root verb qaraya, as defined in the lexicon of Ibn Faris, who died in 1004, which is to gather, to carry, to retain, to deliberate, to witness, to be timely in the now, which is what we spoke about last week. And finally, this week we shall talk about serving and sharing. And when we went through those, the last one, if you remember, we spoke about something which is very important, which is that we should be hastening away from all ithm and fulfilling our designation with bir, and making sure that each of us is ani, in the an. This will come up today as well, and you'll see the importance of it. And we have begun to understand the transforming power of this divine Quran, this divine message from Ar-Rahman, which is in the an for every insan. And as it changed the lives of its first recipients, it has the power to change our lives if we were to receive it as they did. In the an, inshallah. Now here we have to remember something also, which is very important, which is the fact that the Quran is consistent. And today we're going to talk a little bit about that. So if we say, for example, La ikraha fi din, it means that deen has no ikrah. It cannot be enforced. It does not mean that you should not enforce it, although you should not enforce it. What it does mean is La ikrah. There is no ikrah. There simply is no ikrah in deen. So we're going to find out today, because we're going to serve and share. The first thing we have to find out is the meaning of deen. Does it really mean religion? What does it mean? Deen means accountability. Deen means accountability. liability, owing, a humbling obligation. There's a hadith عن الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم, what they say? الكيس من دان نفسه وعمل لما بعد الموت. The clever person is he who holds himself to account and works towards that which is after death. So, من دان نفسه, دان يدين, and the noun is deen. So, dana is to hold yourself to account, to consider yourself liable. So, that is very interesting. Now, the Quran gives us no plural for the word deen. Although in lexicons you find it, and you find, especially in the latest lexicons, 2 plurals for deen, which are adyan and dayanat. When people started thinking of deen as religion, they found that there are many religions, whereas the Quran never uses the word deen for religion. The word deen in the Quran means accountability or the standard of accountability. If it is talking about al-deen, it's the standard of accountability, or in general, accountability. So it is actually important to realize, as we are serving and sharing, we are serving and sharing who? Humanity. So it's important to realize that there is one God, one humanity, and one standard of accountability. There is one universal standard of accountability. There are many milal, but not many plural of deen. I'm not going to say the word because it's not in the Quran. Dayanat or adyan is not in the Quran, so I'm not going to say it. I'm going to say there is one deen, one standard of accountability, one humanity, and one God. Milal is the plural of millah, and millah means what we call religion. That is a millah. That is not a deen. So what happens when we use the wrong word for something, we lose what that word actually means. So we have lost the meaning of accountability because we thought it meant millah. Finished. Now, deen means something else. Deen means millah, so deen is lost. We don't know the meaning of deen. So when we look at the Arabic Quran, in the Quran, we find that deen is pure and free of fault. The deen, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls for, al-deen, now we're talking about al-deen, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls for, which is the standard of accountability, which Allah calls for. His standard, which he calls for, is pure, is free of fault. That's why it is called Islam. And if you, a long time ago, people knew the difference between millah and between deen, and they knew what Islam was. But today we just simply lost it, and we think that our millah is Islam, although our deen is first and foremost Islam. If you know what I mean, we have to go back to our deen, otherwise we'll lose that word and all it means. So what is Islam? Islam is the unbiased, untainted standard of accountability by which God judges us all. Inna dina inda Allahi al-Islam. He judges us by the deen, the standard of accountability of Islam. And we should aspire to Deenillah. That's the deen we should aspire to. And it is the standard which was upheld by all God's messengers, peace upon them all. But today we're not speaking about Islam, are we? That's another talk. Today we're speaking of the word deen, which means accountability, not religion at all. And Islam spread to China a long, long time ago. And I have a dear Chinese friend, rahimahullah, whom I met in America. Her husband had translated the Quran to Mandarin. And she told me when I first met her, the first 3 minutes after we met, she told me, where are you from? I said, I'm from Syria. She said, I'm from China. Did you know that Islam came to us before it came to you? And of course, I didn't know that. And then because she's also very much interested in history, she showed me texts and she showed me proof of that, plus the fact that what they have in China of old mosques and old graves, it seems that Islam went to China very early on, possibly right after the Prophet left this earth, right afterwards. Because we have a hadith in which he says, وَاطْلُبُوا الْعِلْمَ وَلَوْ فِي الصِّينِ. So Sin was known at that time. And we do know that the Muhajirin, those who made Hijrah, went all over the world and to China, as far as my friend, rahimahullah, tells me that they were there then, way before Islam came to Syria, which was Christian at that time. So, as I said, we're not speaking about Islam, however. We're speaking about what? The word deen, and that it is about accountability. And what do the Chinese call Islam? You would be interested to know what the Chinese call Islam, because if it went so early to them, what do they call it? They call it the pure, true faith. The pure, true faith, which is the literal translation of the deen being what? Salim min kulli aib. Salim min kulli naqs. It's about Islam. So now to convince us that deen is about accountability, there are so many ayahs in the Quran. Deen is not religion. How do we know that? Surah 107. أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ. Do you see the one who denies or belies accountability? Such is the one who pushes away the orphan and does not urge to the feeding of the incapacitated. فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدُعُ الْيَتِيمَ وَلَا يَحُضُّ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. Where is religion here? We are talking about accountability, your sense of accountability, your standard of accountability, the fact that you owe it to the yatim, to the orphan, you owe it to the incapacitated, the miskeen. So where is religion here? It's not about religion. Deen is accountability. We lost that word because we thought that deen means religion. What about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? God is the sovereign of the momentous term of account. Yawm ad-Din is the momentous term of account, the time of account, the time when we shall be held to account. That's called Yawm ad-Din. And Allah is Maliki Yawm ad-Din. Religion, accountability, account. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us also in Surah Al-Zumar, فَاعْبُدِ اللَّهَ مُخْلِصًا لَهُ الدِّينَ أَلَا لِلَّهِ الدِّينُ الْخَالِصِ. Worship God in absolute accountability to Him. Certainly to God alone is owed absolute accountability. So we are accountable to each other, but to whom are we absolutely accountable? To Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أَلَا لِلَّهِ الدِّينُ الْخَالِصِ. We're not talking about religion here, right? Of course, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, religion is part of it. We have other ayahs as well. In Surah Al-Infitar, Surah 82, ayah 6 to 12. يَا أَيُّهَا الْإِنسَانِ مَا غَرَّكَ بِرَبِّكَ الْكَرِيمِ. O cognizant human, what deluded you in not recognizing your eminent Lord? And then, الَّذِي خَلَقَكَ فَسَوَّاكَ فَعَدَلَكَ فِي أَيِّ صُورَةٍ مَا شَاءَ رَكَّبَكَ. He who created you, duly proportioned you, in lengthy taswiyah, in whatever state by His leave you were put together, in whatever state He put you, He formed you. كَلَّا بَلْ تُكَذِّبُونَ بِالدِّينِ. Nay, but you do indeed belie or disbelieve in ad-deen, in the accountability, in the standard of accountability. وَإِنَّ عَلَيْكُمْ لَحَافِظِينَ. And there are indeed appointed upon you caretakers, كِرَامًا كَاتِبِينَ, eminent compilers. يَعْلَمُونَ مَا تَفْعَلُونَ. Not what you feel, not the faith in your heart. يَعْلَمُونَ مَا تَفْعَلُونَ. They observe and they mark out every single deed you do. Those of you who have been with us for a while, you know the difference between amal and fi'l. Amal is general. Fi'l is every single action you do. فعل is specific. Amal is general. So we have Kiraman Katibin compiling every single deed we do, and that is what that's related to accountability. Is that religion, or is that our accountability? That's accountability. So Deen is the standard of accountability consisting of mainly social responsibilities. Deen is proven by action and cannot be observed through faith alone. Your action tells of your faith. Deen is the indicator. Listen to this one. This is important. Deen is the indicator of a nation's ranking in virtue. A whole nation, how does it rank in virtue, in righteousness, in rights of every individual? Deen is the indicator of what the nation's rank is in virtue. And Deen, therefore, is the basis upon which a true Medina is established. And we all know that the Prophet, peace upon him, when he made the hijrah from Mecca to Yathrib, after he was there for a while, set down the laws, gave everybody their rights and freedom of worship, of course. We have the Jews and the Christians there. And things were put straight as far as Deen, accountability, is concerned. Yathrib became Al-Madinah. And later it was also said Al-Madinah Al-Munawwara. So that's very important to know. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us also in Surah Yunus, Surah 10, Ayah 105, وَأَنْ أَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا وَلَا تَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. And you should set upright or rectify your direction. أَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا. So your wajh, your direction should be towards the standard of accountability in a hanif manner, and never in any way be of the shirkers, the associators, al-mushrikeen. What is the meaning of hanif? You cannot actually you cannot have your direction towards a deen without being hanif. You cannot maintain. I mean, you can place your direction towards the deen, but you cannot maintain that direction without being hanif. What's the meaning of hanif? From the root verb hanafa, it originally referred to a person's manner of walking, in that person walked with the foot a little bit curved. But what it actually means is about constant, conscious effort to maintain balance, self-correcting at each step so as to detect the right path and stay upon it. And here it says, and not to fall into shirk, because if you don't have hanafa, if you don't have the standard of hanaf, to be hanif, you will fall, because you're self-balancing. You can imagine a tightrope. So we are living this life on a tightrope, and we have to keep self-balancing or else we will fall. And that's a very good analogy. But the interesting thing is that to be hanif, which is to incline or to bend like those who are walking at the outer edge of their feet, to be hanif is in our inherent fitra nature. So to be rigid and not to be self-balancing and supple and hanif is enforced upon us sometimes. It's not us. We are created to be hanif, meaning to balance ourselves. You put us on a tightrope, we balance ourselves. You put us on a path that is not so level, full of rocks, we balance ourselves. It's the way we are. Allah created us to be hanif. However, some people want us to be rigid, and rigidity is the opposite of hanif. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Al-Rum, Surah 30, Ayah 30, فَأَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا, the same command. But here he says, فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا لَا تَبْدِيلَ لِخَلْقِ اللَّهِ. So in your khalq, in the way you're created, in your fitra, in your nature, you can stay on deen as long as you are Hanif. Once you find people not having proper deen anymore, it's because they have lost the ability to be Hanif. They have become rigid. حنفا وهو الميل يقال الذي يمشي على ظهور قدميه أحنف والحنيف المائل إلى الدين المستقيم. المائل إلى الدين المستقيم. مائل meaning you bend towards the right deen. You are walking while you are trying to maintain balance. And that, in another word, we can call it self-correcting. So to be Hanif is to be self-correcting. What does self-correcting mean? It means to constantly be striving to better fulfill your deen, your accountability. Allah's accountability standard is Islam, is yours. We have to keep trying and daily working and daily having hanaf and daily self-balancing so that our accountability standard will be Islam. But inna ad-deena 'inda Allahi al-Islam. And that's what we should be working towards. So again, imagine a tightrope, imagine yourself on the tightrope, and you are self-correcting, you are trying to balance, and in order to fulfill a better standard of accountability. So in order to self-correct, because today we're talking about serving and sharing. So far you have not, you might see where is she going with this, because I haven't talked about service, I haven't talked about sharing, but all this is so important. You will find out why in a moment. Self-correcting necessitates knowing how to balance. That's the first thing, right? How to balance. How to balance despite the changes around you, the pushes and the shoves and the holes and the rocks and the changes around you. You are trying to self-balance, right? So that's self-correcting. That's to be Hanif. But the key to balancing on a tightrope is to lower the body's center of gravity towards the wire. So you are on a tightrope. It's a tight wire. So the key to stay there on the wire balance is to lower your center of gravity towards the wire. You are more likely to remain on the wire or on the deen, okay, when you are closer to the wire or closer to the deen. You are more likely to remain on the wire when you are closer to the wire. More likely to remain on the deen when you are closer to the deen. Amateurs often try to accomplish this lowering of the center of gravity by leaning forward. Although that may lower your overall mass, it interferes with your sense of location in space and you fall. So it's about balancing where you are walking, not necessarily trying to move forward. That's important. So how does one balance while staying closer to the wire or to the correct standard of accountability? How do we balance? By reorienting ourselves constantly, reorienting yourself constantly, renewing your outlook. Whenever you have something that is a challenge or a hurdle, you look again and you renew your outlook. And you are always comparing between what the previous step and the next step. And based on that, you're getting experience. And how can you get experience if you stay in one place on the wire? No way. You have to what? Walk the tightrope, walk the wire. You gain experience. The further you walk on the wire, the more you walk, the more you gain experience, which is why, now listen to this. You won't find it in any book except in mine. Accountability is to be studied and learned from and experienced wherever it might be found. You walk ahead and gain knowledge of accountability wherever accountability is found. That is where you are. What we said, you're trying to stick to the the closest to the deen, right? The closest to the word, the closest to accountability. So wherever that accountability is, that's where you want to be. What if it's not in your country? What if it's not in your community? What if it's somewhere else? How do you know that your standard of accountability is good? How do you know that your community's standard of accountability is good? How? You don't know unless you walk further and walk further and walk further. And what you find there, bring back to your community so that your community would know what the proper deen is, the proper standard of accountability. And you will notice that when wars happen, and especially recently, the wars that took place, I heard, and you must have heard as well, people going into, let's say, from Syria or from any of our Islamic countries out of the country and traveling abroad. They say, subhanallah, I found deen, more deen there than deen where I came from. Where I came from, there was I didn't have a right. Now I have a right. I'm a human being. Where I came from, depending on where they came from, this right, I did not have that right. Now I went to this so-called non-Islamic nation and I found this right, which I didn't have there, etc. So what does that tell you? It tells you that accountability is to be studied wherever it is and brought back home. We're not talking religion. We're talking accountability. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that in an ayah, which is in Surah At-Tawbah, Surah number 9, ayah number 122, in which he says, وَمَا كَانَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ لِيَنْفِرُوا كَافَّةً فَلَوْلَا نَفَرَ مِنْ كُلِّ فِرْقَةٍ مِّنْهُمْ طَائِفَةٌ لِيَتَفَقَّهُوا فِي الدِّينِ وَلْيُنذِرُوا قَوْمَهُمْ إِذَا رَجَعُوا إِلَيْهِمْ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَحْذَرُونَ. It is not for the faithful to head out all together. Meaning you should go out, but don't go out all together. You should go out, but not all together. But rather, لولا نفر من كل فرقة منهم طائفة. But rather, if a touring team, طائفة, making a tour, if a touring team from every group of them went forth to become well-versed in accountability, ليتفقهوا في الدين, to become well-versed in accountability, and to warn their people when they return to them so that they may take heed. So it's the duty of every community to send out of it to other communities, other places, other countries, a touring team, just to see what kind of accountability they have over there, and then to come back home and bring that accountability standard back in case we don't have it. Because what? People evolve. Communities evolve. Generations come and go. People learn. We learn. We should be learning. Not just from what our community is doing, but from what other communities are doing. And we come back to our community and improve upon it. What does the Prophet, peace upon him, say? We know those hadiths. Seeking knowledge is an obligation upon every Muslim. And everything, listen to this, everything asks for forgiveness for the seeker of knowledge. Meaning the seeker of knowledge has everything on earth asking Allah to forgive him. And the end of the hadith says, even the fish in the sea. Even the fish in the sea ask God's forgiveness for the seeker of knowledge. Why do you think that is? Because the ramifications of ignorance will reach the fish in the sea. Look what's happening to the fish in the sea now because of our ignorance. Even the fish in the sea pray for you when you go out and seek knowledge and seek a higher standard of accountability. اطلبوا العلم ولو في الصين. Pursue knowledge even in China. The pursuit of knowledge is incumbent upon every Muslim, and the angels lower their wings, that's a hadith, and the angels lower their wings to the seeker of knowledge in approval of that which he seeks. إن الملائكة لتضع أجنحتها لطالب العلم, because of what he's seeking, which is ilm, knowledge. So most important reason, the most important for traveling abroad is to broaden our outlook and to gain knowledge and learn from experiences that enrich us, offering us intellectual openings that save us from any rigidity and constriction that will stunt our growth and make us rigid on the sirat al-mustaqim, of course, which we know from the Quran is about what? In Surah Al-An'am, the sirat al-mustaqim. It is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us to follow. It is part of our deen. But deen, if you look at the sirat al-mustaqim, you will find it is about accountability. The sirat al-mustaqim is about accountability. Look at the 10 commandments in it, and you will find that they are about accountability. So only by traveling do we really broaden our outlook. Travel abroad and broaden your outlook. And that will save us from the rigidity and the stagnation that causes our children to be actually, sometimes you find them sick and tired of us. You find our children sick and tired of us because they see us existing like in a, subhanAllah, like rigid and inflexible. And we tell them this is the way it is. Why? Because I said so. Why? Because sometimes you say because the Quran says so, because the Hadith says so, but without even knowing what the Quran actually says or what the Hadith, the Arabic of it actually says. So we just say because this is the way it is. But that's not true. You have to find out what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying. So our children have reason. And when I speak to young people, I always start with an apology. I tell them, forgive me and forgive my generation for not giving you the true standard of accountability. We did not give you the true deen. We did not give you the true deen. And I'm sorry for that. I apologize. And that's one reason why I wrote this book, and especially in 2 languages, so that every person will get a chance to read it. So when they walk out on us and what we represent, we have to realize that they are the ones closer to their fitrah. They are the ones who are following their fitrah. They are the ones who want to be Hanif. We are the ones telling them don't. That's very important. So when we head out of our homeland, that should be our aim. And we should bring back what we learn, however, and realign our standard of accountability at home to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so that it remains unimpaired. Because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala completed it, اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم, that time it was unimpaired, it was complete. That time. But the Quran is there, and the Quran is in the An for all time. So we can, inshallah, bring it back to that state, or at least close to that state. But it takes a lot of work and effort. So the Quran is in the An. It's not a static compilation. It's in the An. Once the compilation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Kitabullah, is held by a Qari, and the Qari employs the components of Iqra to actually do the Iqra bit, then it is Quran and gives forth all its bounty. What happened, however, with this verse, and in my book, I do actually go into detail. I'm going to be very brief here. What happened with this verse is that with time, what happened? The concept of deen, which is accountability, changed to the concept of religion. And when that happened, the verse was explained in the opposite way. It was explained in reverse, in the exact opposite. And what happened, if you read many tafasir, many exegesis, you will find that it says that you should learn accountability at home. Don't all go out traveling, learn accountability at home. The meaning of that verse was reversed. And I actually showed how in my book, how Al-Zamakhshari who died in year 1143, spoke of it in the way it was, the way I explained it. And he also said it's wonderful, there's a lot of benefit learning from other people's experiences. And he said, suffering the hardship of travel. He even used the word suffering the hardship of travel Ana al-Safar, in order to learn from other people's experiences. And that was in the year, he died in the year 1143. A century later, Fakhr ad-Din al-Razi, who died in the year 1209, he gave his explanation and he recorded both possibilities. The possibility of actually learning abroad and traveling, and the possibility of staying at home and learning deen at home. So he gave both. A century after him, Ibn Kathir, who died in 1373, interpreted this verse solely that related to the Battle of Tabuk and that you should learn accountability at home. And of course, you cannot blame them for doing that, because when the Quran was revealed, you learned your deen where Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, was, which was at home. It was at home. So you cannot blame them for saying that. Of course, you learn it where the Prophet, peace upon him, was, which was at home. But the Quran is in the An. It's for all time. And this verse at least should be explained in both ways. But now that accountability is worldwide, humanity has traveled and we learn from other people. So now the explanation should be taken in the An, that you go out, a few of you, a touring team goes out and learns accountability and brings it back home, which is what the ayah is saying. So what does self-correcting mean? It means to constantly strive to better fulfill your accountability. And traveling, see now, because we're talking, the whole thing today, we're talking about serving and sharing. Traveling is part of that. Going out of your home is part of that. Service cannot be had or cannot be given. You cannot give service or proper service if you lock yourself up in your room. Service means going out. Service means being out there. So traveling means broader service, and definitely wider sharing, because the sixth component of Iqra is to serve and to share. And how do we serve and share? Who taught us how to serve and share? Who is the first? Subhanak Ya Rab. We learn, we were taught about service and about sharing in our mother's womb. That's where we were taught about serving and sharing. Before we knew how to speak, we knew what serving and sharing meant, because that's what our mothers gave us, right? Whom do we learn how to build from? Also from our parents. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah An-Nahl 16:72, وَاللَّهُ جَعَلَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا وَجَعَلَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَزْوَاجِكُمْ بَنِينَ وَحَفَدَةً. That Allah rendered for you from your own selves what? Mates. And He rendered from your mates بَنِينَ وَحَفَدَةً. What's the meaning of banin? Children you have raised. من البناء. You raised them. Banin and hafada. Hafada are literally nimble servers. Nimble servers. Nimble meaning that they're quick on their feet and they are in service, which is what grandchildren should be to their grandparents. That's the Sunnah and that's the Quran. They were called hafada for you as a blessing because they're supposed to be serving you. And in the olden days, those of you who come from Islamic countries, you will remember in the olden days that you used to see somebody, an old man walking down the street, his blind and his arm on the shoulder of his grandson. You used to see that. We used to see that. Because the grandchildren are supposed to be hafada to their grandparents. And that's important for you as parents to know. Teach your children to be the hafada of their grandparents. Nothing is more pleasurable to a grandparent than to have the hafid around, to have the grandchild around. And in service when they need them, that's amazing. That's even more beautiful. So who taught us serving and sharing? It is our parents, our mother. And how did our predecessors, our early predecessors who were following the deen properly, how did they serve and share? By traveling. They would go all around the world with carpets on their shoulders, with spices, with whatever they did, and they'd go all around the world. That's how we have so many communities of Muslims. The majority of Muslims, the largest population of Muslims in all the world is 1/3 of all Muslims are in where? In South Asia. Okay? 62% of the world's Muslims live in the Asia Pacific region. And the largest Muslim population is in Indonesia. It has 12.7% of the world's Muslim. 12.7% of the world's Muslim. Pakistan has 11.1%. India has 10.9%. Bangladesh has 9.2%. And how many Muslims are in the Arab world? 20%. 20%. Everybody else is not Arab. Okay? So subhanAllah, how did Islam spread to many of those nations? By way of merchants, by way of trade, by way of serving and sharing. They went there with their knowledge, with their iman, with their standard of accountability, and it spread over there. And we are talking today about serving and sharing, which is one reason why I made it a point. I don't want to leave this earth without having left something here, serving and sharing with the Iqra principle, which inshallah will blossom after I'm gone. The book, the blog, the Iqra principle, serving and sharing is what we should all be doing after we do what? We gather, we carry, right? We deliberate, we witness in the now, right? And we serve and share. The beauty of the Quran is that even words that seem to have a meaning which is a little bit selfish to them or a little bit violent to them, a meaning, like the word victory. Okay, victory means you've been victorious over someone, right? And maybe you've squashed that person or community that you were victorious against. For example, okay, what's the word in Arabic? Let's just look it up. The word is nasr, nasara, nasr. Okay. The beauty of Arabic, the beauty of the Quran is that nasr, which is usually translated as victory, is in reality something else completely different. Okay. إن النصر هو إتيان الخير والعطاء. فالنصر اسم للمطر الخير الذي يسقي الأرض. Nasr is about delivering goodness and generosity. Nasr is that special kind of rain that quenches the land. So even when you are, let's say, in a battle and you are fighting and you get Nasr, which is victory, that Nasr has to be about goodness. That Nasr has to be about spreading goodness as if you're the rain, not differentiating between one and another. Like the rain, you spread goodness. I'm just showing you the beauty of the Arabic tongue. So what I'm trying to show you is, please, let us look to the Arabic Quran in the Quran, understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, see the goodness that is in the Quran, see the beauty that's in the Quran, and when we go out to serve and share, to be like the rain that quenches the dry land. Even in Surah Allah says, إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتَحِ وَرَأَيْتَ النَّاسَ يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا. That's the Nasr. That people are actually embracing the deen, the accountability. That's the Nasr. What do you do? سَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ وَاسْتَغْفِرْهُ إِنَّهُ كَانَ تَوَّابًا. All you remember at that point in your Nasr is to be humble to God and to ask forgiveness. You don't gloat. You don't feel proud of yourself. You feel small, you feel humble at the moment of Nasr. at the moment of victory, because victory in Arabic is about ityan al-khayri wal-ata, gifting. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us this command of Iqra, and the command of Iqra holds those 6 components which we have just finished talking about. And I would advise people, when they look at the word Quran, they look at the verb Iqra or Qara'a, and they think of themselves as Qari. So if I'm a Qari, I have to be embodying those 6 components of carrying and what? Gathering, carrying, retaining, deliberating, witnessing, everything in the now, and then finally serving and sharing. Because without serving and sharing, the cycle is not complete. What's the use of you doing all that and keeping it to yourself? It has to be about service. It has to be about service. And then what will happen is that, inshallah, if you do it properly, you will be like a mother who is so happy when she sees her child improving and developing, even if she is not. Like, I'm happy to see others develop further than me, because I'm like a mother, let's say. That's the way I should be, you should be. Like, I see you taking this and then developing. I gave you, let's say, your mother, like a mother, your mother gave you what you need, the nutrients and everything, and raised you and helped you. And then you went out on your own and did amazing things. Do you think your mother would feel anything but pure joy because of that? They say that anybody could be jealous or envious of somebody better than they. They say that people are usually envious or jealous of people who are better than they in some way, right? But a mother and father are never jealous of their children when they are better than them. They actually want them to be better than them. And we should be the same when we serve and share. We want those we are serving and sharing to be much better than us. And that's how the cycle of Iqra, and if we follow Iqra the way we're supposed to, that's how it goes on. And that's what our Prophet, peace upon him, how he taught us. He was our teacher. He taught us that. He taught us that. Even he himself, when he decided something, such as the Sulh of Hudaybiyah, he gave it a 10-year deadline. Even when he decided something, he gave it a 10-year deadline. Because in 10 years, there will be another generation. Let them think for themselves. There will be another state of affairs. Let that state dictate what should be decided then. And that is why when we are doing the blog now, it is exactly 10 years after we are doing the revision of the blog now, exactly 10 years after we finished the blog. We finished the blog in 2013, and now it's 2023, and we are revising the blog because 10 years is enough for anything to remain without change, without improvement, without development. 10 years is enough. So with this, inshallah, with the fact that mothers, they seek so little repayment, is what you should be when you serve and share with Iqra. Do not seek being repaid. You should not even want to be repaid, because repayment is the joy you see in others doing what you were the conduit. You were the conduit for them to get that. So you should, that joy is enough repayment. Do not seek repayment. The Prophet, peace upon him, said, خير الناس أنفعهم للناس. خير الناس أنفعهم للناس. The best of humanity are those of most service to humanity. So as we complete our Iqra principal components today, let us try to be of service. Whatever talents you have, Allahu A'lam, each of us has a special talent. Give it freely to someone. Give your talent freely to someone, because you are giving them nafa, and the most people who are khayr nas, the best among humanity, are those of the most service to humanity. So our talk today was about the Iqra principle methodology, the 6 components of the root verb qaraya, and the importance of names. We had a brief on the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth components, very, very briefly, to gather, to retain, to deliberate, to witness, and all in the now. And we did the sixth component in detail. And we said that deen does not mean religion, it means accountability. And we spoke about self-correcting ourselves with regard to our standard of accountability, our deen, and that travel and being in other communities gives us a chance for comparison, learning, and improvement. We help them and they help us. That's the way we should be in any other community. And our Quran is in the an, which is why one ayah might have been explained in one way when the Quran was, when deen was understood as religion, but actually when we understand deen as accountability, we explain it in a much broader way. And Nasr, which is victory, cannot be victory without your dispersing of goodness to the world, and that mothers are the epitome of tireless serving and sharing without even thinking of seeking any recompense. And the best of humanity are those of most service to humanity. And with that, we conclude our session today. Alhamdulillah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين